quick, but okay. Hey, so as far as I can tell, my OBS scenes and stuff are right. So I think what we're gonna have going here is we're gonna have the two separate streams going on, but we're doing the. I'm very uncomfortable right now. We're gonna have the two separate streams, the two separate chats, but we can answer questions and stuff from both. So that should be pretty good. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm also excited. So like intro wise, I mean, look, this was Matt's awesome idea.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's going on. So I'm expecting to just like, we're going to chat, right? We're going to talk about programming. We're going to talk about Twitch streaming, maybe. We're going to talk
absolutely.
about GopherCon. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, I was thinking actually streaming could be a kind of a good place to start because like I think that we both started roughly around the same time. And I guess just talking about like some of our motivation behind that and like, what we hope to accomplish and whether or not we've done that. I think that could be kind of a cool thing to discuss, right?
That sounds great. That sounds great. Why did you start streaming, Matt?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I realized sometime I want to say it was like April, right? I've been working on open source projects for a number of years anyway, and kind of one of the things that with me is that this I can't get over this scene. It's so funny. Kind of one of the things with me is that like I'm thinking that what I really want is a chance to work on my open source stuff, but also kind of promote it. Like I'm all about that shameless self promotion. So it gives me a chance to not only solve problems that I care about, but gives me motivation to work on things. I can answer questions and teach people, and I think that whole combination of things, as well as just having a lot more time due to the pandemic. Prior like man, I think I had plans like every single weekend for like months, like starting last summer up until pretty much like February, March. It's like I had something going on almost every weekend and then suddenly nothing, right? So I figured this would be kind of a good use of time. I could get started and just start building things and see how it went. And honestly, I'm pretty fortunate. I understand lots of people start and I've already had a bit of a following in the Go community with my open source stuff for a number of years. So, I know some people will start and they will not have very many viewers, and I guess that could be pretty discouraging. But I've pretty consistently had 20 or 30 plus my entire time, which has been great. So it gave me more motivation to keep doing it, which is pretty cool.
That is super great. That is super great. So one thing that I've always wondered, Matt, about your I guess like Go presence is what kind of like what was the thing that gave you your well-knownedness in the Go community, right? It sort of seems like people know who you are, they know your projects, but what was like the project that kind of like kicked it all off for you?
I guess if there was a single like the project, it would probably be the Netlink sockets or the Ethernet frame sockets, the packet sockets package called MD-Layer Raw. I called them Raw sockets. It was a bit of a misnomer and still is kind of. But I think it was probably one of those things. But the thing is with me is that I had just been kind of around and kind of self-promoting, like, like I did this project, posted on Reddit, I wrote this blog post, like there's tons of stuff on mdlayer.com now and stuff like that. So that's been pretty cool, So I think in that case, like I had already, had a few folks and I was starting to go to conferences and do the talks and stuff like that. So people kind of already were familiar with some of my work. And then when I started streaming, people were like, oh, heck yeah, it's awesome. I can go see that,
That makes sense. Question from chat. I don't know, Matt, can you intro him first? Yeah, so I guess the quick intro is that Matt, aka MD Layer, is another Go programmer who streams on Twitch. That's how we met, by the way. So this collaboration is really, it's formed out of the beauty of the online Twitch community.
Yep.
Really from that's like kind of it. I think when I was starting out streaming, I was looking around at all the other folk doing streams on Twitch for programming, and MD Layer was somebody who had a pretty rad stream that I admired. And I guess we like DM'd at one point and got to talking. And then, yeah, I don't know. That's like my intro of what you are. But I guess like, to be honest, like I don't, we haven't really, we don't know each other outside of Twitch. So maybe, where do you work? Where do you live and where do you work?
Yeah, so I work at Fastly. I work at Fastly and I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So if you're doing the hand thing, somewhere around here and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been kind of cool because like, Fastly and previously DigitalOcean were both pretty open to like open source and stuff. So it gave me just kind of an opportunity to kind of flip into that. Which has been really nice, But yeah, I think actually you ended up like messaging me and you said that you'd been streaming for a little bit and you wanted to find more Go streamers and stuff. And it's like, oh, cool, I'll give you a follow. And at that time, like, I think that pretty much just the two of us for a little bit. And then, now we've got Matthew Dembski going. We've got Barrick Michener. We've got some more folks too. Like there are at least 5 or 6 people who do this on a regular basis. So
wait, who is Bear Commissioner?
Barrick Michener. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Barrick Mitch on Twitch and stuff like that. But yeah, I wanted to ask you too, actually. So, like, since I think you started streaming before I did, like, what was your start? What was your motivation to do this,
That is a really good question. what was my motivation to start Twitch streaming? I think, to be honest, I actually don't remember what the first thing that started me off on this was. I really don't remember. That's crazy. I guess like I was just sort of like probably a Twitch fan,
Yeah.
I guess. And presumably I'd watched a few science and technology streams at some point and got me my inspiration, right? But who would that have been? I don't remember. I need to come up with a better origin story. This is horrible. Like this is obviously like a question that I should have prepared for on this on our little interview here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like I don't think I ever really watched a whole lot of live coding. Like I think like Filippo would do it once in a while, but I would never regularly watch live coding. But also
Yeah.
I found that, on Twitch in general, it seems like lots of people are doing things like JavaScript. And it's like that's still
Hmm.
very cool. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not my particular area of expertise or
Hmm.
things like that. So like when I started watching Twitch August, was it? It's been about a year and a half actually. I've been watching Twitch on a regular basis, and I started watching a lot more gaming streamers. It's funny because Jordan and I actually have a lot of the same gaming streamers, like the Mario community we follow, which is hilarious actually because he's one of the only people who understands some of the memes and stuff like that. But it's been pretty cool, So coming from the gaming over to the science and tech side, like clearly it's a much smaller community, but I feel like we also are a little bit advantaged, right? Because
Yeah.
in the tech community there are many fewer people, and people kind of seek you out. Like random people, they'll find a programming stream and they'll hop in and ask questions. Like you'll get the stuff like, "Hey, can you help me hack my mom's Facebook?" and stuff like that. I've had that more than once.
Yeah, people are always trying to get there
Yeah,
to try to figure out how to hack their mom's Facebook. I don't know why that's such a popular one. But yeah, I mean, as far as the communities, I agree. I think that there's something pretty nice about having a group of people who are kind of, it's just like small and also full of people who are presumably have the shared interest of something that's like technical, right? That's, I guess, it's maybe similar, I guess, to like the much larger community of people who have shared interests of games.
yeah.
It's just like, I guess to me it feels like there's more to relate to, right? Since we do this stuff professionally, there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot of questions that one could ask, and it's interesting. I think one thing that I really like about watching other people do live coding stuff is that you can get tips about how people do the work, right?
Mhm.
And like, how do you organize your files? Like, what are the things that you're just like these little quotidian things? Like, did you have any weird shortcuts that you use that I didn't know about, or
Mhm.
something like that? That's something that I really enjoy about watching other streamers.
Yeah, and something I think is so funny is that when you watch anybody stream, and if you ever start streaming, for the people watching right now who have maybe considered Twitch streaming like coding but have not yet, you need to realize that like nobody's process is perfect, right? And you'll see me, for example, fumble around with like VS Code, like I don't know the keyboard shortcuts, or I'll fumble around with my file editor, or like whatever else, like any of these tools, or I didn't know what was it? Isn't it Alt L in the terminal clears it or something like that, or like Control L? And I did not know that until like very recently, and it's like somebody in Twitch chat taught me that. So the thing is that like even though I am an industry, I guess a little bit of a veteran at this point, like I've been in the industry for about 8 years, uh, like my day to day work is still like, sometimes kind of sloppy, sometimes kind of whatever, but it's all about like that process. And kind of, I think it's important for us to humanize ourselves and realize that like everybody needs Google to remember some silly algorithm or whatever else. Like that's a totally normal thing, and you shouldn't be ashamed of that, right? Like I think it's pretty cool that like people are willing to, when we go on stream like this, like we're able to show a little bit of like vulnerability and like, show people the process, right? I generally am pretty picky about my code and I want to ship something that's like very complete, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Question from Raphael: what are the demographics, gender, race, economic class in live coding, age distribution? That's a good question. I
I
mean,
have no
to
idea.
be honest, I haven't studied it deeply. I would say that it probably skews kind of white and male, but there's several people of color who I follow on Twitch that I'll call out. There's Jason J. Phillips, who I guess he's called Pull Up and Code or something like that. He used to work with me at my first company. And then I think her name is Taylor Alexander or Taylor something like that. She goes under twitch.tv/cyberbarbie. And she's a great streamer. I think she's kind of earlier in her career, but I think there's like, I would like there to be more diversity. And I think there's definitely some role models out there for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you probably have more info than I do. Like, what I really should do is go find more Twitch streamers like who do coding outside of just the Go community. Like, of course, this is my community, this is what I'm most comfortable with, but I really should expose myself because I find that like a lot of the time when I'm done streaming, for example, there's nobody really on my follow list I can send a raid over to. So I think it's pretty cool if you can just find somebody who's working on some project and just send them a raid. Like it's kind of those good vibes. And that's something I
Definitely.
really should work on.
Somebody's asking Chachi from the chat, how did you get into Go programming?
I think it'd be good for both of us to answer that question, but I think for me, so I originally, let's see here. My first open source project was a media server written in C#, and I was actually building it and running it on Linux because at the time there was the mono C# runtime, stuff like that. So by that point, I'd already developed an interest in network programs, and then I was doing PHP professionally at work, and it was whatever. Like, I mean, I was kind of looking for a new thing, but I hadn't really committed at that point. So I think for me, a friend introduced me to Go, and it took him, I want to say, at least 2 or 3 different tries, and I was just hesitant for some reason. Like, I just figured, like, oh, it's this little language, it's not really, it's kind of cool, it's kind of different, might not go anywhere, I don't know. And one time I just sat down and I did the Go tour, and I really kind of dug into it, and we decided, like, okay, so if we can do this and we can build these things, like, let's write a BitTorrent tracker in Go. And we did that, and it's actually still on my GitHub, and it's really bad. But the thing is that it was a great learning experience, and I ultimately learned a ton doing that project. It turns out Go is very, very good for building network services, and that's really what I care about. Like, the thing I really do is networking, and that's especially been true the past 4 or 5 years, but I think it's very cool that, Go is so well suited for that purpose. And frankly, I was telling somebody earlier, like, the only things I wouldn't really do in Go are, like, operating systems type stuff, like kernel level stuff. Like, I would be interested in something like Rust or Zig. But for any kind of like user space, like whether it's like systems programming, interacting with Netlink, or HTTP APIs, like I feel like Go's a good fit. So I'm curious what your origin story is with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, somehow, so right, I was mentioning this a little bit earlier during the stream, but the very first exposure I had to Go was in college. I was doing this, it was some kind of like computer architecture class, I think is what it was called. And they had us write a MIPS simulator. So MIPS is some like architecture that I, to be honest, like don't even really remember what it does or what it's about. I think it's kind of like a reduced instruction set kind of operating system, or instruction set rather. And so they wanted us to write a simulator for it, and Go is this programming language that like was sort of up and coming. To be honest, I forget exactly why I'd heard of it at that point, but I sort of wanted to try it out. So I wrote the assignment in that, and then I put it down, and I didn't use Go again until I was, hired by Cockroach Labs to work on Cockroach DB. So basically, like I put it down for like, I don't know, like 7 years, and picked it back up professionally. And yeah, so then I've been basically using it exclusively ever since.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of funny because we come at it from different perspectives, right? Like for me, I started writing Go for side projects, and I was like, I want to work at a company that does Go, and that's how I ended up in DigitalOcean, because at the time they were one of the sponsors of the first GopherCon. So I kind of went down that list and I saw who was hiring and what they were doing, and I was like, oh, building cloud backend in Go. And I remember interviewing there and saying like, oh, you must have a lot of Go deployed already. Like, oh yeah, we're working on it. Like at that point, there were maybe 1 or 2 services. Like the majority was still in Perl, but by the time I left DO a couple of years ago, there was a lot of Go.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
So let's see. Quick questions from the chat here. Well, this is not a question. Search Netlink and Go, Matt pops up all over the place. Yeah,
that's
so
true.
You're famous, Matt. How frequently do we work out? You could go first.
So I'm aiming for my goal this year is 4 times a week, but I've been doing more recently 5 or 6. But I can't lift weights right now. I had surgery about a month ago, and I'm fine now. I'm good. But one of the conditions is that like they had like cut some muscles in my abdomen and stuff. It's like I can't really strain, and I can't lift more than 10 pounds. But I want to get back to lifting weights really bad because it's really fun, and it definitely helps with like your hands and stuff. Like for me with programming, I wrote a blog about this a couple of years ago, but I used to have a lot of problems with like, hand pain, joint pain, especially my elbow. Like this would like kind of fall asleep, the nerves and everything. And I found that weightlifting really helped with that. So I got into it a little bit during college, but I started taking it more seriously the past like 3 or 4 years, and I miss doing that. But since I can't go to the gym right now, I've got a set of weights here, and I do like cardio on like a little bike, but I make it work. So
that's cool. That's like quite a bit more advanced than what I've got going on right now. To be honest, my physical fitness since COVID has been like the absolute worst. I don't really do any structured working out, and that was a big problem for me when I discovered like halfway through quarantine that like even going on like a couple of mile walk to the park made my like legs really sore.
Yeah, right.
So like that's been a pretty sad realization. I don't know. Like I guess before quarantine, I was doing this uh like spin class thing. I don't know if you've ever done that,
I have
but
not done it, but I'm familiar. Yeah, that's awesome.
so I was going to this place called Flywheel. I think it was called Flywheel, right? And I got really into that because it's kind of like working out's not really my favorite thing, but I'm a music oriented person, and the music at Flywheel, it's very cheesy, but it also like it like it puts you on an emotional arc, right, to working out. And so like for whatever reason that sort of motivated me to do a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was working out until COVID struck or whatever.
Right.
Standing desks. Personally, I have only a sitting desk. At work, I had a standing desk, but I have no standing desk here. I kind of am sad about it. I think you have one, right, Matt? I see your
I do.
desk
Yeah,
going up
I
and
was
down on your
actually.
stream.
Yeah, I was actually considering if I wanted to stand today, but I felt like it might be kind of weird with me standing and you sitting. So yeah.
Well, I just would have adjusted the,
Yeah.
it sort of looked like this or something like that.
Yeah, little more chill this way. But yeah, I do have a standing desk and I actually really love it. So I've got an entire like blog of stuff. I can drop a link in both the chats, but
Yeah,
I've got a blog with like my whole setup, and it's definitely I built it up over the course of a few years. So I mean, the gear itself like is fairly. Here we go. The gear itself is fairly. I've got a lot of different pieces and stuff, lots of moving pieces, but I built it up over time, and it's like you don't have to invest in everything at once. But I think that if you're working from home and you want to take it seriously, like a standing desk is one of the best investments you can make, because for me, like ergonomics really matter. Like ergonomics help me not like hurt myself when I'm working. So
yeah, it's important. We do a lot of typing, right?
yeah, and it's something you don't really think about. And honestly, I ignored the symptoms for years. Like I would just program and hack and hack and hack like all day. Like I had an internship. I was working full time and I was in my last semester of school. So I would go to work, like, do 6 or 8 hours of programming and then stay after work and work on my senior design project for like another 6 hours. And I was doing like 12-hour days, and it's like, oh, my fingers hurt a little bit. I thought it was just a bad keyboard or something, but it did not occur to me at that point that I was kind of wearing myself out. So you need to be really careful. It's important. On the topic of fitness, really quick, so Taryn asks, consider picking up Ring Fit for the Switch. Either of you have experience? I do not. I have a Switch. I do not have Ring Fit.
I also do not have Ring Fit. My friend was considering buying it. I don't even know what it is, really.
I don't know what it is either. Yeah, the name is familiar, but I don't know anything else about it.
So. Faust asks, do you guys plan to start your own startups at some point in the future?
It's a funny question because like people have asked me that several times, but I don't think personally I am interested in much outside of the technical space. Like I think I would have a really hard time like starting something from the ground up, like unless I was just focused on the technology aspect. Like I don't really see myself as the kind of person who wants to go speak to investors or that sort of thing. It's just not really my area of interest. Like I find that if I can get paid to work on something I appreciate and then have time to do my open source stuff, that's where I'm really happy. So
yeah, you could be. I mean, I don't think that you have to be the financier, right, to be a startup person, right? You can be more of that CTO role, and maybe you can have a really businessy CEO, and they can do the fundraising, and you can kind of just be the technology director, maybe, right?
Yeah, I don't know. How about you?
I think for me, I think that like, I don't know. It's like there's appealing things about starting a company, and there's things that are like deeply unappealing about starting a company. I think the things that I feel excited about thinking about starting a company. By the way, to all who's watching, not doing that anytime soon.
Yeah, me either. Don't worry.
Rooted at Cockroach Labs right now. But yeah, I would say that the appealing thing is being able to make those key decisions about the culture and structure of a company early on in the ways that you think are good, and having sort of the ability to make changes when you want to. I think without having to get stuck in a cycle of, well, I don't know, disagreements or consensus building. I think also for me, some of the most fun times I've had at companies have been when they're relatively small. And if you start one, I guess you get to be at a company when it's pretty small. That being said, deeply unappealing things, just as kind of what you said, right? Like you have to deal with a lot of other stuff, business things. Right. And you also have to be 100% invested, like all the time, right? That's going to be your baby for N years. It's not going to be as easy to take vacation. You're going to be more stressed, and you're going to have a lot more on the line. And I think that I don't know. Do I really want to be doing that? It's just not exactly clear to me. Would I be able to Twitch stream as much? Like, probably not. I like Twitch streaming.
Yeah, totally.
Those are some things.
Like it's kind of funny because like I can see myself like, I can see myself doing like the 15 or 20 person company thing again, but probably not the 3-person company,
Yeah. Were you at a 3-person company?
No. So I've actually never been in a company that small before, but I think let's see here. So I think when I joined DigitalOcean, they were like 50, 60. There was a place here in town that was like 30, and then another place in town that was like 120. So I think my smallest is still about 30. But even at DigitalOcean, that early on, like that 50, 60 person phase, that was pretty wild. That definitely kind of taught me like what startup culture really is. And we learned a lot along the way. But it was also my first time working remote, so that was an experience as well.
Somebody was actually asking about remote. Do you prefer to be in the office or remote or mixed? And what was that like joining Digital?